Awesome. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Imperfect Marketing. I am super excited to have today's guest on. We are going to be talking about brain glue. James I. Bond is one of America's leading behavioral management and business marketing specialists. He's also the author of a multi-award-winning book called Brain Glue: How to Sell Easier by Making Your Ideas Sticky. For 13 years, he ran one of Southern California's leading behavioral management firms, working with a who's who in American business. Early in his career, he ran an advertising agency in Montreal, and he worked with a wide range of Fortune 500 companies and smaller firms. He is a past workshop chairman and sold out workshop leader for the resource partner of the U.S. Small Business Administration. He's been a featured guest speaker at 3 Southern California universities and has been a popular guest on a wide range of marketing and business podcasts. And now we get to add imperfect marketing to that list. Thank you so much, James, for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Kendra, for having me. I mean, my parents actually had me, so thanks for having me again.
So let's jump right in. So what does making ideas sticky mean? How do you make ideas sticky?
So, I'm old enough to remember. I'm old, so let's start there. Things have to stick when you're old because they kind of go in one or out the other. So I remember Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Okay, now the last time I heard that was maybe 60 years ago, and yet I still remember it like it was yesterday. Okay, on my deathbed, you could say, by the way, James, Jack and Jill. And I'll go, okay, went up the hill, I don't know, Humpty Dumpty, sat in a hole, I mean, we remember these things. There's certain things that we remember, and there's actually psychological reasons why we remember certain things. They stick to our brain. And there are two famous experts. There's Gerald Zaltman, who was a Harvard Business School professor, and there's Daniel Kahneman, who was a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, and they both recognized that more than 90% of decisions are made when the right side of the brain, the emotion side of the brain, is triggered. And so what happens is, as I go through this, I had an advertising agency in Montreal. I live in Southern California now. We actually gave our middle daughter the initials L.A., Lauren Asia, AJA, and she's, and so that we'd remember, how long have you been in Los Angeles or the Los Angeles area? We go, well, how old is Lauren again? So I got that. That's really good. But when I ran an advertising agency, I worked hard to build clients. And I ended up getting Fortune 500 clients, Kraft, Timex, Avon, Abbott Laboratories, Seagram's, their world headquarters is in Montreal. And so I did really well, but I've always been trained to sell with logic. I didn't realize that emotional selling is more powerful. And we had an opportunity to win the anti-drug campaign in America, and we lost it. And we deserved to lose it. We had logical reasons why you shouldn't use drugs. But then I remember seeing the ad, and it terrified me because it was so fabulous. And it was this guy holding an egg and said, "This is your brain." And then he cracked the shell and dropped the egg into a sizzling frying pan and said, "This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?" And it was fabulous, but it terrified me because this was emotional selling, and I'm used to logical selling. And so I remember, I was terrified, and I had sleepless nights. And then I came up with this idea, and I said, they don't teach in school emotional selling. And I went to a library. They don't have, there's really superficial things on emotional selling, but they don't really teach it. So I came up with this idea. I guess I'm a technical person, so I figured, I got to figure this out. And so I wrote "Your Brain on Drugs" on a 3x5 card, and I created a box. I called it a passion box. And I said, I'm not going to overanalyze it. Every time I see something that's emotionally engaging, really powerful, I'm going to put it in a box. My wife hated going to doctor's offices with me because she'd go I'd be going through a magazine. Oh, this is fantastic. She said, "Do not tear it out of the magazine." No, I have to put it in my box. She would move away. I do not know that guy, but I filled my passion box. Many years later, and I've been doing it for 35 years. So I'm old, so I've been putting stuff in the box. But so I met when I was in Southern California. I met and spent time with John Gray, and John Gray was telling me that he wrote a book called Men, Women, and Relationships. Fabulous book, one of the best relationship books ever. Okay, but he sold 20,000 copies. You know, when you're an author, 20,000 copies isn't that much. Okay, and he was frustrated, but he was doing seminars. He was doing a seminar to promote the book, and he said something, and all the women in the audience laughed hysterically. And the men were kind of looking at the women and going like, what was so funny about what he just said? And so, so a woman in the audience said, it's all, it's, um, this is proof, or he said, this is proof that there's certain things that women get and laugh at or understand, and there's certain things that men get. There are a lot of things that we both get. And then one of the women said, it's almost like men are from a different planet. And he laughed and he said, yeah, I guess men are from Mars. And they laughed hysterically, everybody in the audience, it's really funny, which I think we might be from a different planet, but that's a whole other story. But so when he got home, he was telling me, he was thinking, if men are from Mars, where are women from? I guess women are from Venus. Venus is the god of love. And he got this crazy idea. What if I change the title of the book? And then I'll go into the book and I'll put like references to men are from Mars, men are from Venus. It'll be the same book, but I'll refer to it all the way through it. What do you think happened? We all know that men are from Mars, women are from Venus. He went, okay, almost overnight he sold 500,000 books. It was like, people started buying it. They saw it and they would laugh. Oh, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. That's funny. They pick it up and they start looking through it and they'd buy it. Then 1,000,000, then 2,000,000. He sold 50 million copies of the book. He went from 20,000 to 50 million copies just because he changed the title. And to me, it blew my mind. It's like, could that be it? Is it the things we say? If we can change how we say it slightly, can we understand how to say it in such a way that it explodes and people like buy it like crazy? So I went to put it in my passion box and I said, you know what? This is too good. I've got to take it out. So I took my passion box, I dumped it on my bed, and I said, this is a scientist in me. Are there, categories? His men are from Mars, women are from Venus. I mean, we're not really from a different planet. At least I don't think so. So it's a metaphor or analogy. Okay, so are there other metaphors and analogies? And I went like, okay, here's another one. Shark Tank, the TV show. It's not a tank full of sharks. I mean, it feels like it if you're on the show, I bet, but it's not a tank full of sharks. But it feels like that. And so if they called it Investors Club, do you think as many people it would be as popular as Shark Tank? No, I don't think so. Shark Tank is really powerful. I remember reading about Rocky Road ice cream. And Rocky Road ice cream helped Dreyer's ice cream go from struggling business to massively wealthy success. Okay, and so look at Rocky Road. Rocky Road, it isn't like you open it up and you get rocks inside it. Okay, it's chocolate ice cream with nuts and marshmallows, but it's bumpy like a Rocky Road, so it's kind of a cool name. The second thing is it uses alliteration, the repetition of sounds, Rocky Road. And so I started researching alliteration, and I realized, wow, you've got major brands, billion-dollar brands that started with nothing and turned into billion-dollar brands with alliteration. Coca-Cola, Best Buy, Bed Bath & Beyond, Lululemon, it's just, there are so many of them. TikTok. TikTok's a massive success. You think it's a coincidence that they chose alliteration? It's like, no. And so I realized that. Also, it uses humor, Rocky Road, because Rocky Road was developed and introduced during the Great Depression. And the Great Depression was called a rocky road. This is a rocky road that everyone's on. So their concept was, you're on a rocky road, you might as well eat Rocky Road ice cream. And people would laugh as they bought it, because humor triggers oxytocin in the brain, which makes people much more receptive to buying from you. So as I was studying this, and I took my piles and started putting things in different piles, I started understanding rhyme. Rhyme is a good example, and we know with the O.J. Simpson trial, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. With all this evidence against him, and yet still he faked that the glove didn't fit him, and then while his attorney Johnny Cochran kept saying, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. And I remember two of the jurors were being interviewed after the trial, and the interviewer said, with all that evidence against him, how come you let him go? And one of them said it while the other one was nodding her head, and she said, "Well, we knew if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. The gloves didn't fit, so we had to acquit." You know, I mean, could rhyme be so powerful, or brain glue tools? I call it brain glue because it sticks to the brain like glue. But could they be so powerful that you could actually get somebody off from a murder trial? I mean, like, wow. And so, and then I discovered, and so I started recognizing how powerful rhyme is. So I was standing on the corner in Winslow, Arizona. What a fine sight to see. It's a girl, my lord, in a flatbed Ford, slowing down to take a look at me. The Eagles wrote this song, okay? They were not trying to sell Winslow, Arizona. And yet their song has made Winslow, Arizona really popular. It's on Route 66. People are driving along and go, "Oh, Winslow, Arizona. Oh, we got to stop there." You know, the Eagles song. And so they have fun with it because it's really it's a nothing town. I had somebody else who's in Arizona said, "Have you ever been to Winslow, Arizona? It's like there's nothing there." But they put up a statue of a lamppost with a guy leaning on a lamppost and a sign. It's in a brass sign or whatever it is. I mean, the statue. And it says, "Standing on the corner." And this lady was telling me, yeah, and they also put a car with a girl inside it right next to it so people can take pictures when they get there. You know, they weren't intending it to do it, but it sticks to the brain. Because it sticks to the brain, it becomes really powerful. Then I learned about chiasmus, which is a brain. So rhyme is A B A B. Chiasmus is A B B A. It flips. So I'll give you some examples of chiasmus. Okay, winners never quit, and quitters never win. Okay, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Okay,
Get
so we
going.
have lots of those, and when you say it with this way, it sticks to the brain because the brain loves patterns. Okay, comedians use this. I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy, which is kind of a little strange, but anyway. Mae West was awesome. Mae West was the beginning of the motion picture era, and she was fabulous. She actually was. Her biography is amazing. I don't know why I haven't seen a movie on her. It was so funny. She created a play in Broadway called Sex, and she had some things in it that were like, I guess, a little over the top. And so they said, you have to change it or we're going to arrest you. She said, no, no, please arrest me. Why? Because she knew I get publicity when you arrest me. There were just famous actors that we love that she discovered them. I mean, she was amazing. But so she loved chiasmus, and she said things like, women women love a man with a past, but they prefer a man with a present. Okay. And she says, good girls go to heaven, bad girls go everywhere. She had like really funky lines. So, but when I started to understand this, I grew up in a time with John F. Kennedy and with Martin Luther King and all that stuff. And so John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. It's chiasmus flip. He said, mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. Malcolm X, he was a black civil rights activist. He was amazing. He said, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock landed on us. Now if somebody said, well, hey, you don't understand what we've gone through as blacks, having gone through, the tortures and the troubles, maybe it would stick, maybe it wouldn't. But if you say, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock, the rock landed on us, whoa, it creates an image in your mind and it sticks. He also has another line. He says, when you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. These are profound. I mean, these would outlive the person who said it. So I start to realize, when you learn how to use these tools, you can use it like for all kinds of things, including making a lot of money, by the way. But so this mom says to me, she read the book, Brain Glue book, and she says, oh, it was great. Can you help me with my kids? I've got twins, and they never, I read them a story, and they want me to read another story, and another story, and they don't want to go to bed. Can we come up with something? So we came up with this thing, and it was, let me remember this. When the story's read, we go to bed, okay? And so she said to the kids, she tried it. She said, when the story's, so, hey, mommy, can you read us the story? She said, okay, but remember, when the story's read, we go to bed. So repeat after me. When the story's read, he said, we go to bed, mommy. Okay. So he said, okay, fine. So she read the story. He said, mommy, another one. He said, when the story's read, and they all went, okay, we go to bed, mommy. Okay. She said, it worked. Now you have to help me with my 14-year-old. I said, okay. Terrifying. But she said, so my 14-year-old boy said, Mommy, why do we have to follow so many rules in life? And she says, I don't know how to answer that question. So I started brainstorming with her, and we said rules. Well, what rhymes with rules? Fools. Okay. So only fools don't follow rules. So that's one way to start it, okay? I said, but let's give them a zinger. So let's do an analogy or a metaphor. And so I sat down with her son and her, and I said, so you were asking your mom, why do we have to follow so many rules in life, right? And he said, yeah. I said, so when you're thirsty, you could drink out of the toilet, but why would you want to? Remember, only fools don't follow rules. And he goes, that makes sense, which is, by the way, very strange for a 14-year-old to say, that makes sense. You never get that. Okay, so I was like, okay, I'm going to escape before he asks me another question. But doesn't really make sense. Or did I just trigger things in his brain that made him feel like, okay, that makes sense? So in politics, there are two quotes that I heard that are really fascinating that use the same concept. And one of them is, you can't hug a child with nuclear arms. Okay? Obviously, it's ridiculous, but it clicks because it's triggering part of the brain. There's another one that says, the right to, a comedian said this, the right to bear arms is almost as crazy as the right to arm bears. It's like, okay, it's ridiculous. Okay, and I'm not taking a side one way or the other on this, but it's fascinating when you hear these things. Suddenly, people go, ugh. At first, not only does it stick to the brain, but we can repeat. So we remember it, but we can also repeat it to friends. And so, yeah. So to me, brain glue is really powerful because I wrote the book, and it's about right brain selling, emotional selling, triggering the right side of the brain. And by the way, there's a problem with logical people, and the problem is, I'm a logical person. Logic, if you use too much logic, it turns off the emotion side of the brain, and it makes it harder to persuade people. I work with finance people all the time, and they say, well, I was working with these famous finance people, and they were working with a famous musician, so I don't want to say who it was, but I've been working with them and sort of helping them to be more emotional. And so this guy is talking to this famous musician, and he says, and if you invest in this thing, as well as the other things you have, but invest in this thing, then you'll make like 14% interest or whatever it was, whatever the percentage was. And I could see the guy's eyes were glossed over. I try to explain to these guys, have you any idea how many people hated math in school? Why are you throwing math at them, And so I saw like his eyes were glazed over. So I came over and I said, because I had known what they were investing in, and I said, well, just by the way, this is the same thing that John Lennon invested in before he died, and that's why his estate maintained most of his wealth after he died. He went, oh, John Lennon invested. Yeah, okay, yeah. Give me the papers, I'll go for it. And so I'm trying to explain to them how you've got to, when you're able to understand what triggers emotion, it's easier to get them to say yes to your ideas or your products or whatever else. It's just so my book, Brain Glue. So logical people are stuck with logic, okay? So I might be an expert in brain glue, but I still get tortured because I start with logic, And so my book was originally called Sell More with the Right Brain Marketing Strategy, which is logical, not emotional, okay? And so I got lucky. I met Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. The series, which, by the way, sold 500 million copies, 500 million. Can you imagine? How many billion people are there on the planet? And 500 million people read, 100 million read Chicken Soup for the Soul, and then 400 million read the other Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul, Chicken Soup for the Cancer Victim Soul, things like that. But so he read my book, and first he got mad. So it's like, what? He said, I can't believe it. I was just reading just little things of your book because I have so many books I have to read, and I couldn't put your book down. So I said, I'm sorry. He said, no. He said, but your title is stupid. You're selling me you're teaching me brain glue, and your title is called Sell More with the Right Brain Marketing Strategy. Your whole book is about brain glue. You should be calling it brain glue. So he forced me to change my title, which is hard because when you post a book on Amazon, when you publish a book on Amazon, then you get reviews, and I think it's after 50 or 100 reviews, then and suddenly it triggers the algorithms at Amazon. And I'm at like 50 or 60 or 70 reviews already. People love the book, which is kind of fun. But it's like, oh, do I have to? And he says, yes. And when it's Jack Canfield, when a famous person is telling you have to do it, you go, okay, sir, yes, sir, So I changed it. But it's just, it's an easy trap to fall into, even me, when I go into it. But when you go through the concepts of it, it becomes so much fun that you can actually get your kids to bed on time. I mean, like, whoever thought you can get somebody off a murder trial because it sticks to the brain. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that you said that I really liked. And so one is an inspiration file. I think everybody should have an inspiration file for whatever inspires you. I encourage it to not be your industry and not be what you do. I have an inspirational email file that I go to and will reference and see, oh, okay, why did I open this email and what stuck out about it to me? What did I really like about this email?
Yep.
And I think that inspiration file or your box is huge. It can give you so many ideas that are just so powerful when you reference them and take a look at them and see why it spoke to you.
Yep.
So I think that is fantastic. And also I say all the time, people buy what they want, not what they need.
Right.
And I struggle with that a lot because I'm like, people need to understand their target audience.
Yep.
Nobody wants to understand their target audience. They just want to sell. Now they can't do it unless they understand their target audience.
Right.
But, that's how we go back and forth a little bit with that. And I think it's a very powerful stuff. And I think business to business, business to consumer, either way you go with it, I think there's a lot of power in what you're sharing. So everybody take a step back, take a look at what you're doing and what you're communicating. Are you communicating and connecting on an emotional level? I think that is huge and has so much opportunity.
Well, and you said something
Now,
in one of the other podcasts that I was listening to of yours. You said something that's really critical that people have to understand too. So you have your target audience, but what's the moment when they're ready to buy? Because so my mom passed away last year, and
I'm sorry.
but before she passed away, for several years, her husband died, and she was independent, but she was elderly, okay, but she took care of her finances. I helped her, and so to caregivers, we were a perfect target because she needs a caregiver, but she wasn't. My mom was independent; she drove herself. But to them, I was an ideal target. Then she got a stroke, and we needed a caregiver. And so I went from being an ideal target, which I was not, to suddenly being a hot target at a short window span that suddenly now I need a caregiver. How much does it cost? What's involved? How do I know a good one from a bad one? I mean, I need to know this really fast because she needs it today, and so I have this one lady I work with, a friend, Robin Thompson, who's a finance person I think she's in Detroit actually, on TV, like the finance person on ABC. And she's so she has this program for women who make over $100,000 a year, and suddenly find that all their money is going to all this debt stuff, and they're not saving much. And so we're talking through this, and we said, but what's the moment? Just because a woman has $100,000, and just because she's spending it on all these her house or what all these expenses and stuff, doesn't mean she's ready to buy now. When would she be ready to buy? And we came up with this scenario: is that let's say she owns her own home, and suddenly she has to get a new roof, and it costs $20,000. She goes into her savings and realizes, wow, there's not that much of my savings. That moment, and then we recognized it's that moment that you want to talk to. So we said. We came up with an advertising program that said, have you looked at are you a woman who makes over $100,000 and you're freaking out because there's so little in your savings account? When you understand the moment that they become a buyer, I mean, we think prospect. Okay, they're prospects. They're not prospects. I mean, they're roughly prospects, but I like to think of it this way. You're in a room with 100 people. Okay, that are prospects, as you define it this way. So you want to define it and say, okay, if this sounds like you, raise your hand. And then you just start explaining, this happened, you did this right now. If that sounds like you, raise your hand. Then a few will raise their hand, maybe 10% if you're lucky. And you say, okay, you guys, let's go to the side of the room. I want to talk to you guys. Everybody else, I love you guys, everything. But I'm going to talk to those guys over there. And that from marketing, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to differentiate and understand what's the moment, the catalyst moment where somebody actually becomes a buyer. When you understand that, suddenly your marketing changes. I worked with a caregiving company, and I said, okay, so somebody had a stroke in their family, a mom or a dad. So let's build a campaign that says, did your mom or dad have a stroke recently? And then we build this program, the training on the other side saying, well, not all caregivers are the same. There are certain caregivers that understand how to work with stroke victims that are very different from everybody else. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And suddenly they found their sales took off like crazy because, because they're talking to that moment when, when a person actually becomes a buyer.
Yeah. No, finding them at the right time in the right place is key. What my signature course is called List Growth 101, and
what's it called?
It's about email marketing. List Growth 101.
List Growth 101.
So it's about growing your list because people only care about growing their list.
Right.
The course is about business to business marketing and email marketing, and it's bigger than just list growth, right?
Right.
But nobody cares about that stuff. So it's just very interesting that, again, people buy what they want, not what they need.
Yep.
They're buying based on emotions, and emotions are the key.
Yep.
This has been fantastic. There's so much that you have to share. We have a link for his book in the show notes and the description, so definitely be sure to check that out. But before I let you go, James, there's something that I ask every guest that's on the show. The show is called Imperfect Marketing because, as you and I both know, marketing is anything but perfect. So what has been your biggest marketing lesson learned?
Well, I have two. The first one is obviously related to brain glue, and that's that if I'm too logical, I'm actually turning people off. It's, I saw somebody with a T-shirt that said "Life sucks and then you die," and I'm like, no. Life has to be passionate. That's why the passion box is so important, as you're talking about that too. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, just because you get what you think is a great idea, you have to observe. You have to, there's a powerful brain glue tool that's simple reflexive questions. Isn't it, doesn't it, shouldn't it, don't you agree are simple reflexive questions that you add to the end of your phrases. And I learned that when I learned this, I actually had a better relationship with my kids and my wife as well as with clients. Because I say something and now I say, da 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 da, does that make sense? And they'll go, oh, yeah. Does that mean it makes sense? No, it means that they're just saying yes, but it doesn't make sense. And you want to catch them early on. And so I learned, the power of not just making statements and throwing your words at somebody, but being interactive with them, observing. I'll even do it to an audience. I'll have like 300 or 500 people, and I'll say something, and I'll say, does that make sense? And I'll see a bunch of people with like glassy stares in their eyes. I'll go, okay, well, let me explain it in more detail. We need to be more interactive. I think females do a much better job than us males. We blah, 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 as I am doing right now, sorry. But anyway, it's just, and not listen. And we need to, there's that old line that says you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So you should be listening twice as often as you should be talking. And so that, to me, that's really powerful.
Yeah, no, those are great tips. I love them. I love what you had to share. I think that it is so important. So I would say after you listen to this podcast episode, pull up your website and start taking a look at your headlines. Are you talking to people from an emotional perspective? Are you asking them the questions and building a relationship? If you are not and you're looking for more ideas, definitely get James's book. Brain Glue sounds like an amazing book. I haven't read it yet, but I will read it by the time this episode comes out, and I'll make sure to add some thoughts on there in the show notes. But thank you again so much for being a guest here on Imperfect Marketing. For those of you listening, if you learned anything from today's episode, I would like it if you could subscribe to it, either wherever you're listening to your podcast episodes, or if you are on our new YouTube channel with the Imperfect Marketing episodes, please ring that bell and subscribe to this channel. We appreciate having you on here,
Thank you.
having you listen. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.